That's sexy, brother. That's hot. We're rooting for Tuten, so to speak, right? That's what we want. All right, everybody, and welcome back. As always, I am your party host, Joe Rivera, and along with me, as always, one of the preeminent ball knowers of USA Today Sports, and you know him as Jacob Camenker. We know him as Vodka Roo. And Jacob, fantasy football playoffs are here, my friend. You've been helping fantasy managers this entire season get to this point. How you feeling? How you feeling? You feeling good?
I'm feeling pretty good. We had a good week last week. Our Blake Corum pick ended up popping off, so it's kind of nice to close the regular season with one of those high upside picks that pans out. So I'm feeling pretty good. I think I've got a pretty good grip on what I think is going to happen. It's not going to be easy to navigate the quarterback landscape with Daniel Jones going down and there not being a ton of streamers out there, but I think I got enough advice left in the tank to hopefully get fantasy managers to a fantasy championship this year, Joe.
I hope you do, because we're showing up at your front door with pitchforks and torches, my brother. We gotta bring some championships home, right? Now, some of you are lucky enough to maybe have the week off, so the pressure isn't exactly on. You can sit back and watch your competition tear itself apart. The group chat is probably on fire, but for others, we got to talk about some locks, right? We have to talk about some must starts this week. No sleepers at this point, because we're at the point where, all right, we know the lineups, we know what we got to do, we got to get this thing done. So, Jacob, let's start off with your must start players of the week, and a guy that's been kind of under the microscope and in the blue medical tent, and returning, came back. Jaxon Dart, must start for you. Why is he a must start this point in the season?
Yeah, I know there's going to be some people who are a little afraid to start Dart because the Giants are de-emphasizing him as a runner, which makes sense because he's been banged up at times this year. He's had a concussion. They were really cautious bringing him back. So it makes sense that he wouldn't run as much. He only ran 4 times against the Patriots, and he took that massive hit on the sideline from Christian Ellis, which I'm sure interim coach Mike Kafka saw and was like, absolutely not, don't do that. But here's the thing, Joe. Dart has a really good matchup against the Commanders through the air this upcoming week. Washington surrendered 26 passing touchdowns to quarterbacks this season. That's tied for third most in the NFL. And last week, Joe, we saw J.J. McCarthy. J.J. McCarthy, same J.J. McCarthy who's been terrible for most of the year, throw 3 touchdowns against the Commanders. So I'm looking at that and saying to myself, hey, Jaxon Dart's been better as a passer than J.J. McCarthy. He's looked more comfortable, more confident. So even if the rushing upside isn't there, I think he can have a good game as a passer, go for over 200 yards, get a couple scores, and he will still run the ball. It's just not going to be at the same high rate as usual. But I think he's kind of a high floor option whose ceiling is pretty good, and what could end up being a shootout if Washington's offense shows up.
Yeah, they're telling me that the JJ and JJ McCarthy actually stands for Jamarcus. So I don't know how true that is, but that's I'm gonna have to do my research on that. Dart's interesting, Jacob. You're not concerned with his depleted skill position crew. I mean, you're looking at Theo Johnson and what else here?
Theo Johnson and Wandale Robinson. I like Robinson. I think he's just one of those solid possession type receivers. He doesn't have the size of a possession guy, but you get the ball in his direction, he gets open. He's on the smaller side, but has good hands, and he can stretch the field a little bit. So I think between those two targets, where Theo Johnson has the size you're looking for, but maybe not the consistency you'd like to see out of him, at least with catching the ball on a consistent basis. But I think those two targets will give Dart enough to put together a decent performance in what's a really good matchup for him. So I'm not too worried about that. He's kind of made it work all season without Malik Neighbors. So I think this is going to be a solid outing for him.
All right, Jacob. Now let's move down to the Jaguars. And Bheyshul Tuten is a guy who makes your must. I like it. That's sexy, brother. That's hot. We're rooting for Tuten, so to speak, right? That's what we want.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, trusting him might seem strange after he had as many carries last week as he did fumbles. So I could see a lot of people looking at this and saying, what are you talking about? Why should I trust Bheyshul Tuten? But here's the thing, Joe. Tuten got banged up on the first kick return of the game. Very first play. He had a fumble on that play. He didn't lose it. But I'm wondering if the Jaguars kind of looked at what was going on, them beating the Colts, and said, hey, there's no point in risking getting Tuten any banged up any further. So we're just going to take him out. He had another fumble and just say, hey, let's just write this off as a lost game for him. This matchup against the Jets is a whole lot better. The Jets have surrendered over their last 4 games. And I'm sorry to bring this up because I know you love your Jets, Joe. They've surrendered an average of 142.25 rushing yards per game. And that's to go along with 9 rushing touchdowns in 4 games. So that's more than 2 rushing touchdowns per game. So, you look at the Jaguars, you say, yeah, Travis Etienne's going to get most of the workload. He'll probably get some red zone carries, but Bheyshul Tuten has gotten opportunities in the past. So if the Jaguars go run heavy and find success against this Jets team, and if they build a big lead, Tuten's going to end up getting enough opportunities that he can be a quality flex play. Now, maybe his ceiling isn't as high as some other running backs out there because Etienne is still going to get a lion's share of the work. But if you can get 10 touches from Tuten, you're going to be pretty happy plugging him into your flex as a guy who can just get you through the next round.
Yeah, and I think the thing with the Jets too is that the uncertainty at quarterback is going to kill them this week, right? As of Wednesday, we don't know what's up with Tyrod Taylor's groin injury, Brady Cook going to start again. I mean, and that's not, for a Jets offense that's already scuffling. You figure that the Jaguars will find ways to put up points and they'll have the extra possessions, right? Because you just don't see that Jets offense moving the ball at all. So I like it, Jacob. I think that's a smart pick. And I'm not going to call this next pick smart because I think a one-game sample size of Jamarcus McCarthy, but sorry, JJ, but the one-game sample size of JJ McCarthy being a quality fantasy starter leads to Justin Jefferson getting the auto start this week. I'm not so sure, pal.
Look, Joe, it doesn't sound fun at all. I say this is someone who had Justin Jefferson in my main league this year, and it's been brutal. He's only topped 50 yards twice with JJ McCarthy at quarterback. In the last couple weeks, he's had 4 total catches for 15 yards. Granted, one of those games was with Max Brosmer at quarterback, so he was never going to do much in that one. But even last week against the Commanders, JJ McCarthy didn't look JJ's way. Like Justin Jefferson only had 2 catches and really wasn't involved much. But still, Joe, it's a matchup thing here. You have an elite level receiver like Jefferson. He still has talent. At some point, the Vikings are going to try to force feed him. And if it happens in this matchup against the Cowboys, it could end up being a big day for Jefferson because the Cowboys have allowed a league high 22 receiving touchdowns to wideouts. I think at some point over the final 4 weeks, McCarthy is just going to say, hey, look, I'm just going to throw the ball to Justin Jefferson on half of the snaps and just see if we can develop this chemistry. I think Kevin
I
O'Connell
worked with Sam Darnold last year. So, just make it work again, right? Like, that's the number one thing. You got this guy out there. Just throw him the ball.
Exactly. So I think Kevin O'Connell might even look at this and say, hey, look, for next year, you guys are going to have to develop a better chemistry. It doesn't matter what we do down the stretch. We're basically not going to make the playoffs. So just develop that chemistry, give him 15 targets, give him 20 targets. So I think that could end up happening, just the force feeding. So I'm going to trust Jefferson this week. It sounds like a terrible idea, Joe. I know it does. But at some point, Jefferson is going to have a breakout game in this final month, and I would hang my hat on that.
All right, Jacob. So you gave fantasy managers the locks. Now you got to give them the players to avoid, like we've done all season, right? The stakes are high here, not only for fantasy managers, but for the Chicago Bears and quarterback Caleb Williams, my friend. Who's your must-sit list this week? He leads your must-sit list. So why is Caleb a must-sit?
Yeah, so I know a lot of people are going to look at the fact that the Cleveland Browns gave up 31 points to the Tennessee Titans last week and say, hey, Caleb Williams, he's probably going to be in for a big game. It's important to remember that Tony Pollard did a lot of the damage for the Titans offense. He had, I think, over 160 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. So it might be more of a DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai game anyway against this Browns defense. The other part of this is Cleveland has been pretty good against the pass and generates a lot of pressure, which is going to be problematic for the Bears because Caleb Williams, when pressured, his passer rating is 55.3 on the season, Joe. Compared to when kept clean, it's 100.3. So you're talking about a 50-point swing in passer rating. If Myles Garrett and this defensive line get after Caleb Williams, they're going to force him into some mistakes or some bad throws or just limit his overall ceiling. So I think you're looking at a team that has the 5th best pressure rate in the league and a quarterback who's not very good at pressure. So I'm just going to be willing to fade Williams this week. He's kind of a borderline start anyway because the Bears like to be ground heavy. So Williams is a guy I'd keep on my bench if I don't have any other good options at quarterback.
Yeah, and a few things here, Jacob. Number one, Kyle Monangai mentioned, are you rah-rah, right? So there's that.
Yep.
Number two, Myles Garrett is still chasing some history here, right? So you got to figure he's going to be a little extra motivated against the Bears squad that, listen, Caleb Williams throws that bad interception. We'll see how he rebounds. Ben Johnson has been moving him in the right direction this season, but, moving forward, you just don't know. You just don't know. So it's an interesting sit for you, but one that I can see the logic for. So let's move on. Let's move out west to Omarion Hampton and the Los Angeles Chargers, who makes your must-sit list. Now, Hampton missed a lot of the season with an injury. How much does that factor into your decision? And why is he a must-sit this week?
Yeah, so the injury is a big part of it, Joe, at this point, because the Chargers kind of eased him back into action a little bit against the Chiefs. It's not like they didn't give him opportunities. Give him 13 carries, but the bigger story here is that Kamani Vidal was really splitting touches with him. Vidal had 14 carries to Hampton's 13, and I kind of anticipate that to continue because Vidal has been very good this season for the Chargers, and Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh love to use multiple running backs. So I think you look at it from that perspective and you say, all right, well, Hampton's not going to be a true workhorse. They're going to try to mix in Vidal, and they're going to try not to overwork Hampton, especially not ahead of the playoffs. They want to make sure that coming back from that ankle fracture, their first-round pick is healthy and able to be that explosive complement to Vidal so that they have that two-headed rushing attack in the postseason. The other part of this is the Chiefs' defense has been very good this year, so it's going to be tough for Hampton to get the volume and the opportunity to put up these big numbers. It's also worth noting he's only twice managed to surpass 3.7 yards per carry in a game this season. And really against the Eagles, he was below that number until a burst in overtime. That game shouldn't have gone into overtime. The Eagles really blew that one. So I'm thinking that Hampton has a much lower floor. His ceiling remains high, but in the fantasy playoffs, if you have other options at running back that are safer, I would just put Hampton on the bench and say, this guy's not going to get the consistent volume of opportunities needed to be able to trust him in this spot.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the injury, Jacob, is just, that says it all, right? Like, we always talk about reliability and how much you can trust the guy. And listen, I know he's back, he's healthy now, whatever, but for me, if I'm a fantasy manager, I'm not looking at a guy who's been hurt most of the season and saying, you know what, I'm going to trust him in this spot. So again, I agree with your logic there. I think that makes a lot of sense. Last but not least on this list, Jacob, Michael Pittman, Colts wide receiver, is a must-sit this week. And you don't trust 44-year-old Phillip Rivers or one-legged Riley Leonard to be throwing him the ball this week? What's up with Michael Pittman? Why is he a must-sit?
It's exactly that, Joe. I mean, the quarterback situation with the Colts is one of the weirdest we've seen in a long time. Just all the injuries. You had Daniel Jones suffer the torn Achilles. Super unfortunate. He's had a breakout season. But then his backup, Anthony Richardson, had this freak eye injury back in week 6. He's out because of that. Then you put in Riley Leonard, a 6th-round rookie. Now he's got a knee injury. And now you're talking about the two options. If Leonard can't play, are Brett Rippon, who is on, I believe, his 3rd team in the last 4 months, and Phillip Rivers, who last played during the COVID-impacted 2020 season, Joe. I mean, what are we talking about with this team? It's insane to me that Rivers could end up being the guy here. And hey, it's going to be fun to watch. But in all reality, the Colts are playing the Seahawks this week. The Seahawks have one of the best defenses in the league, and we might be having them have a quarterback out there who hasn't played in 5 years. That's a situation I want to steer clear of. I think Pittman's floor is super low. It's sort of similar to what we saw when Justin Jefferson played against the Seahawks with Max Brosberg. You're looking at it and you're saying, man, this could go really, really far south really quickly against quality defense. So I would sit Pittman. I would sit Alec Pierce. I don't know if I would sit Tyler Warren because there's just not a lot of depth at tight end, but you have to at least consider it. I wouldn't start any Colts aside from Jonathan Taylor with any confidence. And that's only because Taylor has earned the right to be that guy you plug in every week.
Right, and I feel like, obviously Jonathan Taylor is a must start every week, but if you're a fantasy manager and you got Taylor on your roster, this is a week you're in the playoffs where you're licking your lips, right? You're licking your chops because you figured whether it's Phillip Rivers taking snaps or Riley Leonard, they are going to lean on him. You might as well run the Wildcat all game with Taylor in the backfield. So we'll see what happens with the Colts if there's any more quarterback bad juju happening there. Well, Cowboy, it's been good, bad, and ugly this season for you, my friend. You're still looking for that white Bronco, but instead, you're just looking like a horse's you-know-what. Last week, you came close. You said Josh Allen and Joe Burrow would be engaged in an all-time shootout, with both quarterbacks throwing for 300-plus and multiple touchdowns. Now, close but no cigar only counts in horseshoes, right? This week, Sheriff might be putting those handcuffs away, but you got to give us something, Big Take Jake. Still looking for that bullseye. What you got for us?
All right, partner. This week we're going to be downgrading a struggling steed as we're fixing to fade the Indianapolis Colts. Colts may be turning into crowbait because of all their injuries at QB, and are trying to fix them with a lick and a promise. We may end up marching out old-timer Phillip Rivers to start against the Seahawks this week. Seattle's strong defense could have Grandpa Buckaroo wishing he could light a shuck and head back to the ranch. Expect the Seahawks' elite defense to hold the Colts to single-digit points this week as Indy continues its march out of the AFC playoff picture and into the bone orchard.